Welcome to everyone for joining us for the MS-CAD 2017 webinar, How Smart Polylines Can Up Your Game in MicroSurvey CAD 2017. So we have three speakers today going over some of the significant new features in MicroSurvey CAD 2017. My colleagues Jordan Friesen from MicroSurvey Quality Assurance, Olivia Floyd from the MicroSurvey Support Department, and myself, I'm James Johnston, the MicroSurvey Support and Training Manager. We also have Mark Vino, who's watching your questions on the chat line, and we'll hear from him at the end of the presentation. During this webinar, we're going to have presentations on 5 topics. We will follow up with a short poll asking for the audience's reaction, and we'll have a pause at the end for questions. While you're attending the webinar, have a look at the handouts section. We've got a PDF of this PowerPoint for you to download if you'd like, and use the chat line. Mark will be watching the chat line, and some of the questions we'll field at the end. Some of them will be answered privately, and if we miss some of your questions, we'll follow up by email. So let's get starting learning about how new features can improve your productivity with MicroSurvey CAD 2017. So the agenda for today is to go over these 6 topics. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, how Smart Polylines can affect your cadastral work. I've got another example where we'll look at how Smart Polylines can help with a surface modeling task. Then we'll have a look at how Smart Polylines enhance the field to finish functionality of the product. Then we'll have Jordan and Olivia talking about the new Bing imagery feature, about the new point blocks feature, and about the new additional angular units. So I'd like to start off by talking about Smart Polylines. This is by far the most significant addition to this 2017 edition. It's just 2 words, but it adds a lot of functionality to the product. So I'm actually going to go over 3 examples of how this new feature can enhance the product. So the first thing for me to discuss here is just what are Smart Polylines. Now, there are lots of people attending this webinar that know MicroSurvey CAD very well. They're already familiar with one of the primary functions of MicroSurvey CAD is it allows you to use survey data to build a CAD plan. And so most people are familiar with the fact that we have smart points, smart blocks, smart labels, smart lines, and smart arcs. So these are all CAD entities that can be linked to your measurement database and that can dynamically update as you need them to do that. Now we've gone a next step, and I feel like we've kind of closed the circle because the last major type of entity is the polyline, and we've now got it dynamically linked into the survey database or the points database, and thus the traverse and your measurements directly. So this will affect 2D polylines, 3D polylines, and a special type of 3D polyline that I'll call a 3D curve. And some of these you may not even know about. It's important to understand that there are multiple ways of generating smart polylines now. So in a way, this 2-word feature, it is kind of like multiple features. You can generate smart polylines simply by labeling or adding points to a 2D or a 3D polyline. You can manually create a 3D polyline using the 3D curve command, or rather a smart 3D polyline, or a number of major methods for importing field work allow you to generate smart polylines. So FieldGenius Sync Wizard, the Leica DBX import, if you use XYZ coding or SDR coding, or if you use the Automat process to generate your line work, these will all allow you to generate smart polylines. So a nice little summary is the old workflow is relatively unaffected, but now you've got some additional tools to work with, and this just gives you many more capabilities. Now, in this image I'm looking at, I'm just showing you the new CAD polyline information dialog that pops up whenever you pick on a polyline now. And it's very much like the point editing dialog, the CAD lines dialog, the CAD curves dialog that experienced users know about. It just allows you to review information about the polyline. It gives you information about whether or not it's connected to some points, and it gives you additional information that's relevant to the work that you do. So let me go through 3 examples of how smart polylines change the way you get things done for the better. So let me do an example where we're simply doing a cadastral task, and I'm generating a right-of-way, and I'm going to label it. So I've just got a series of slides here. So here's an example where someone was given the task of surveying a right-of-way through this cut line. It happens to be in northern Alberta. You can just see from the arrows the path that the cut line takes. So the survey was done, just ran a traverse down the middle of the cut line, and you can see there where it was run. Now this work goes back into the office, and we've imported the traverse, and we've used some of the COGO routines to enter the relevant parcel lines. Then you've used regular CAD routines, and you've used polylines to generate the boundaries of this right-of-way. Nothing has changed up until this point with the way the new workflow works. Now what we're going to do is we're going to annotate those 2 polylines, and we're going to make them into smart entities all at the same time. And I just want to go over some of the relevant settings that would affect this annotation. So experienced users will recognize the labeling defaults dialog. So built into the product, you've got labeling defaults that allow you to pick from 5 different predefined styles for creating labels. Some relevant settings, you may need to assign a text offset to a style if you're using heavy lines. You've got the option to reference north, and so if I was drawing bearings, that forces it to always draw my bearings in the 1st or the 4th quadrant. Or if I have azimuths, it will keep your bearings between 0 and 180 degrees. You've got control over the rounding that is done in the label. I'll switch over to the distances settings that would affect this operation. And in this case, you may also want to add a scale factor so that you're automatically converting grid to ground distances. So all those settings are relevant, and they'll be applied when you use the auto bearing distance function, and you'll see that over on the left-hand image. So here's the process for labeling the polyline. So I've highlighted, or I've selected, or I've started the routine, and I've picked the 2 polylines that I want to label. Next step, it asks you which side do you want to plot the bearing. And all the bearings are created, and the polylines are added to the survey database. And here I've just zoomed in a little bit so you can see what the end result would be. So existing users right now will say, okay, that used to be a 40-step operation. Now it's a 4-step operation. It's much quicker because you can pick the polyline and the whole thing will be annotated. At the same time, it's important to point out when I do a little zoom in here that absolutely everything you see here on the drawing is dynamically linked to your database now. So if I later on do a datum transformation, or if I correct the traverse or anything like that, then all the points that are linked will be corrected. Everything that you see here will be updated. Labels would be updated, positions of line work would be updated. You don't have to pick any special function to tell it to rerun, it just does it automatically. Okay, So I'm going to move to a completely different type of a task. So here I'm going to show how we can use Smart 3D Polylines to reduce your workload when you're doing 3D modeling. So in this example, what we'd like to do is design a little cul-de-sac that is going to be created on some gently sloping terrain. If you look at the drawing here, you can see that we've already defined the location of the cul-de-sac using COGO routines. We've already labeled them. And you can see from the contours that there's a gentle slope. It'll be high on the right and low on the left. Notice how one of the features that's required in this design is that we want to have a low point on the cul-de-sac right there on the left, and the designer has given us an elevation to use so we can put a catch basin there. What you'll do after you've done the COGOing is you can just use point editing or the active coordinate editor to assign all the elevations to your point nodes. That makes it really easy for us to go to the next step. So here we're going to use the function called draw a 3D curve. Now this is not a new function, it's actually been around for a few years, but it's really powerful for 3D modeling. So you can see the image on the left. You can see where you launch draw a 3D curve. And what this allows you to do is pick on CAD entities that have the desired elevation, and it allows you to generate a 3D polyline. And it's important to point out the capabilities of this 3D polyline. It will consist of straight lines, of splines, and it can consist of arcs. Because you have picked on points with varying elevations, it also does a vertical curve fit through that polyline. So if you look at the center image here, once you've created it, notice how you've got a series of vertexes going around the bulb of the cul-de-sac. And you'll find that those vertexes have their elevations adjusted according to the 3 points that were used to define that arc. And the one thing that is new about this feature is as you create the 3D curve, it will now make it into a smart 3D polyline. So what I've done now is I've created the 3D polyline, and it's very simple to use that polyline plus the polyline that you see in the middle defining the crown to create a surface. I just use the extract to surface function. Again, nothing new. Experienced users will recognize it. And you see that I've generated a tin just to have a look at the surface. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use another feature, not a new one. It's called 3D flow lines. It's a feature that allows you to pick a spot on your surface and inquire, if I dropped a drop of water here, where would it flow? It's good for checking your drainage patterns. And so notice what I've done here. I picked a couple of spots on this surface and asked it to draw arrows to show where the water will flow. It's not going to my culvert on the left. And notice how I even asked it to show me a pattern from the culvert or from the catch basin, and it's flowing out to the center of the cul-de-sac and then off to the curb in a different spot. So there's a problem here. Let's do some investigation. So some attentive audience members might already have noticed that when I started working on my design, that even though the label said that the elevation should be 108.5, I typed it in as 109.5. So I've done a blunder here. And so that explains why our drainage patterns aren't working correctly. In the past, that was something that you could fix, but it was fairly labor intensive. Now this task is made really easy. What I can do is I can zoom in on the point that's defining the catch basin location. I can use the point editing dialog to correct its elevation. After I pick on OK, watch the next slide. What you'll find is the point has corrected its elevation, and then the 3D polyline that's defined from it has also been redrawn. So the elevation interpolation that went around the bulb before, all those vertexes are now corrected for this new elevation. Now it's relatively simple again to use extract from surface to rebuild my surface. And now I'll check my drainage again. And so notice this time I just asked it to show me one pattern. I've drawn a little polyline on the right-hand side of the cul-de-sac, and you notice how a water drop now will flow over to the curb. It'll run all the way around the cul-de-sac, and then it goes into the catch basin. That's the way we want it to work. And then as a final step, there's a function called Auto Site Design that allows me to build a new design surface using my 3D polylines and my existing ground surface. And there's what the result would look like. Okay, on to yet another example of how Smart Polylines make the product more powerful. This will affect your field to finish work in a way that kind of evolves from how we used to do things, but it's much more powerful now. So here's an example of a survey that was conducted by one of our customers in the Irish Republic. Now in this case, he used Field Genius to collect a series of points and lots of line work on this little topography job in a little subdivision. And this is a good example of how Smart Polylines make your field to finish tasks much simpler. So what you'll find is that now that we have Smart Polylines, any line work that's correct that is collected when you use either Field Genius or the Leica Captivate data collection system, they'll be imported in a single operation so that you'll have points, you'll have a traverse file, you'll have all of your line work. It gets imported in one step. And any line work that is drawn as a polyline will become a Smart Polyline. Experienced users will remember that in the past, polylines, if you had to make a change, it was a fairly cumbersome process of correcting them. But now it's quite a transparent process. So let's go over what happened here. So the project has been imported, and you can see a little detail of the CAD drawing. That's what would happen when you use the Field Genius Sync Wizard routine to import your points and line work. Everything's looking really good. You can see how the AutoMap has assigned the correct line work layers. You can see how blocks are inserted at the appropriate places. But notice how there's a big question mark there showing that there's an arrow that's out of place. So let's investigate. Now, looking at an aerial image is by no means a substitute for doing actual field work, but it's kind of handy to know that you can use either Bing imagery or you can export your project to Google Earth just to check against the latest aerial imagery that's available to see if you can confirm a suspicion that maybe there was an error with the survey. And yes, I can see the arrow that was meant to be surveyed in the center of the road is placed somewhere differently, and we can also see that there was a setup location that is clear from the arrows, and that's what happened. So this isn't the substitute for going out and resurveying, but it is a really good way of solving the problem. So what we can do now is go back into the traverse file, which gets collected as part of the whole process. We can tell that we had misidentified a backsite point, so we can just change it. And then there's a recoordinate traverse function, and what this will do is recompute the positions of all the points that are affected by the traverse. And now that we have Smart Polylines, that means that all of the line work will be updated at the same time. And so now you can see how the arrow has been moved so that it's positioned back in the correct place. And so I've shown you a quick example where a traverse adjustment can have this powerful effect, but it's really important to point out that the dynamic link of the points database to the line work also makes it much easier to do a datum transformation. You may have to do a bearing rotation. You might have to scale from grid to ground or change a scale factor. You might need to send your project to StarNet, do a least squares adjustment, and then bring the points back in. Everything will update in a single step. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to say about Smart Polylines. There's much more to say, but I hope I've highlighted some of the advantages. And thanks very much for listening to me. I'd now like to turn the microphone over to my colleagues Olivia and Jordan, and they're going to talk about a few other significant features. So Olivia is going to tell us about the new Bing imagery feature.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So I'm going to talk to you about the Bing imagery. It's an easy way to bring in aerial imagery or the Bing road maps, as you can see to the left, and then the aerial imagery is to the right. The image is saved on your computer, so you get to keep the image after you insert it into the drawing. And I think users will be very surprised of how easy it actually is to import these images. So how to get the Bing license. It is free with 2017, although you may see a license message when you first launch the command. That just means the Bing Maps subscription is not on your key yet. So you can just either call or send us an email and we'll put it on your key. And we've been trying to, in support, if you call and talk to us about a support issue, to automatically put it on your key. So using Bing, so when you first launch the command, you'll see this dialog box. The first thing you'll need to do is agree to the terms of use, and then you'll be able to pick either aerial or road maps for your image source. And then the position of the image, you can either pick to center on the current view or pick a point that you would like to center on. You can put in a lat long or an actual address, like a civic address. The slider will determine your resolution of the image, and you can keep previewing it by pressing the preview button down in the bottom, and you'll see a preview of the image to the right there. The insertion layer is automatically set to imagery, and if you'd like to change it, you can change it at that pull down there. And then the file of where the image is actually saved, you can pick that, or I think it's automatically set to save where your drawing is located.
I think you're correct.
And then the result would be a background image for your survey data. So it will be either the aerial, which I've shown here, or the Bing road maps. And if you're wondering about the quality of the image, you can just go on the Bing website, and that will show you the quality and resolution of the imagery in your area.
Great, thanks, Olivia. Two more features that we'd like to talk about, and then we'll pause for any questions. So Jordan's going to join us. Jordan has been really devoted to doing a lot of testing with 2017 as part of his quality assurance role. So he knows the new features really well. First, he's going to tell us a little bit about point blocks.
Thanks, Jim. Well, one of the many changes made to MS-CAD 2017 was the implementation of the point block feature. This was arguably one of the most requested features that we received from our user forum, so don't be afraid to send us suggestions on how we can improve our products. In previous versions, when a point is created, it has a point node, a point ID, and possibly a description and an elevation label. These are all separate entities linked to each other via the MicroSurvey database. This new option will now allow all these entities to be stored as one unified block, whereas if the user clicks on one label, all connected labels and entities are also highlighted. This feature can easily be turned on and off at any time from the system toggles. All right, a big benefit to using point blocks is the ability to move, rotate, and reset the label elements. Here we have 3 overlapping points, which makes it hard to read the individual labels. To solve this common problem, MSCAD 2017 allows the user to drag each point block labels to a new location either with or without a leader, and then the user can rotate the labels one at a time or all at once, or reset them back to their default location if if he or she is not happy with the location that it was set to. So there's an image of a kind of a finished product with the 3 points, actually 4 points, with all the labels very legible. The point blocks function much the same as non-point blocks, as in they still use the default MS point description, point number, and elevation layers. However, the MS point layer controls all the point blocks elements' visibility, but still allows a user to turn the individual labels on and off via their respective layers like in previous versions. Also, our AutoMap system and IPN labels work alongside with the point blocks, so there is no loss of functionality using both of them.
Thanks, Jordan. And Jordan's also going to talk about the new Angular units.
So another change to MSCAD 2017 is the added support for the Angular units decimal degrees, grads, and GONS, and an overall system-wide update to make the direction formats used in the program more consistent. This allows the user to easily switch between the 4 angles by simply selecting the desired option from the general configs dialog and completing a rescale and or recoordinate to push the changes through the program. This makes it easy to share drawings between other engineering disciplines, eliminating the need to manually convert the data. All 4 units are fully supported throughout the entire program's routines. So wherever an angle or direction value is called, the input and output will honor the selected unit. In previous versions, this was somewhat inconsistent, where we would show a degrees, minutes, seconds, along with, say, a decimal degrees labels as an output. So in MSCAD 2017, it doesn't matter if it's a CAD or COGO calculation, an annotation, traverse entry, or editing, any point cloud animation operations, it will honor the selected format. This consistency ensures the user will always be working in their native Angular unit, no matter what function they use or what format the received data was in.
And something that Jordan had remarked to me that really impressed him about this feature, as he did lots of testing on it, was just how easy it is to transform your project from one unit to another.
Yeah, it really is really easy. To quickly demonstrate this, here we have a sample project completed in the QDMS Angular format, or commonly called bearings. As you can see, the line labels and the active traverse editor all respect the selected direction format where applicable. Please keep in mind that all angles turned will only be displayed in either the DMS, decimal degrees, or GONS format, as the quadrant bearings format does not really apply for an angle turned. We will now change the project to show azimuths instead. Again, simply select the desired Angular unit from the general config dialog, complete a rescale and or a recoordinate to push the changes through, and here is the updated data. Again, the same with decimal degrees, and the same with grads and GONS.
So thanks very much, Jordan, and thanks for all the work you did in making sure this is such a solid new release. Thank you to the audience for listening to our presentation. We are really interested in hearing from you now. I'd like to launch a poll in which I ask you which of the features that you've just seen you think will impact your work most significantly. So I'm going to launch a poll that it's actually a multiple choice question. So if you don't just want to pick one as a favorite, then you can pick multiple ones, and then we'll share the results with the audience as soon as that gets done. So there you go on your screen. You'll see you can pick one or you can pick multiple features. Getting a great response here. So I can see people are still inputting their answers. So I'll just wait until we get to 100%. Okay, I'll close the poll in about 5 seconds. Okay, and I'll share the results with the audience now so you can see what our totals are. Let's just review those. So interesting, the Bing imagery, that's the one that most people think they're going to use. Good, we're pleased. We're looking forward to hearing from you so that we can add that to your license. And looks like point blocks comes in second. I know that lots of people who use other CAD products will recognize that functionality, and they must have had smiles on when Jordan was talking. 41% are going to see Smart Polylines as a powerful addition. And it looks like the field to finish functionality, I agree, is probably where you're going to see that benefit immediately. Okay, let's hide the results and on to the next stage. So I know that we've been getting lots of questions in the chat line. I'm glad Mark was watching because there was so much going on today. Mark's got some questions for the panel, and he'll also have some questions, and we'll see who else wants to respond to those as well. Mark, you ready to go with a few questions?
Certainly, Jim. The first couple of questions have to do with the Bing imagery. The first is, what is the quality of the aerial imagery that you can import from Bing?
So the quality would be the same as the Bing maps that you can find on like their website.
Okay. The next question is if we can confirm that Bing Maps allows us to import imagery by typing in a street address.
Yep, so any address that Bing recognizes, you can just type into our program, so any civic address or anything in the world.
Okay. Next question is about file types and storage. One of them is, can we open MicroStation DGN files?
Oh yeah, we've been getting questions about that for ages. Yes, actually, that's something that's built into 2017 now. Thanks to an additional feature from IntelliCAD, yes, you can import DGN files now, and you can export DGN files now, and they look just great. I've tried it out.
Excellent. And regarding these project files, can we store these project files in cloud storage?
Yes, you can. MSCAD 2017 does support cloud-based storages such as Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, or Google.
Yeah, I know why people have been asking that question. We've had that question many times, and it's really nice to be able to say yes now.
I've got a question here about point block feature. Are the point blocks easy to turn on or off?
They are quite easy. It is a simple toggle or a checkbox in the system toggles area of the program. So you can turn them on and off at any given time, and it'll automatically convert the points to point blocks, or from point blocks back to the old standard points.
Certainly. We have a question here about MicroSurvey CAD for MacBooks.
I've had that question before. The only I know that our CEO Jason, he actually likes to do that, but he does it where he's running a Windows 10 operating system, and he's just running MicroSurvey CAD on that.
Okay.
We don't have a specific Mac install.
Excellent. Last question I've got up here is, can we import Esri shapefiles?
We can't yet, but the foundations are in place, and I know that one's in the works. I also know, I think that was actually one of the top feature requests in our feedback forum.
Okay.
Good. Well, thanks. Those were great questions. Thank you to the audience for forwarding those. If we didn't get your answer to you, we'll follow up with you by email later on, or Mark may have answered you privately as well. So just double check the chat line. Okay, let's tie this up. So I'll note, while we've still got the webinar going, remember that in the handout section, you can get a PDF of this PowerPoint. We've also been recording this presentation, and you'll get a follow-up email with a link to that recording. If you have any colleagues who've also missed the event but would like to join us, we'll have a link for that posted on our website, and also anyone who's logged in, they'll get an invitation to view the recording. We don't so much have a webinar special as we have a free thing to give to everybody, and you'll notice there's a wink there because the free thing is the Bing Maps license. Again, it's a feature that we've added to all of our existing customers. You just have to tell us that you want that license on your key. So give us a call and we'll give you Bing Maps for free. Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of my colleagues, Mark, Olivia, and Jordan, for presenting. I'd like to thank the audience for attending as well. And I'd like to thank our developers for putting together such a great product. Thanks to everybody, and hope to talk to you again sometime.